our special guests, Jay and Kate, say something by way of brief introduction about themselves, and then Rick, and then we'll go back around and give each of those people a chance to say more. So Jay, why don't you get things rolling? Who are you? Where are you from?
I'm going to light a chalice first, Joel.
Right. Yeah, I forgot about that. Okay.
I was just about to say we should light the chalice first.
So
we have to have a joint. We have to have joint memories here. Yeah.
Exactly. So I knew that you had planned on that, Joel, and this is a difficult and dark time for us in our Unitarian Universalist movement, and we are really, I think, being kept in the dark in important ways, in significant ways that diminish our ability to be the Unitarian Universalist tradition we're called to be. And so we're lighting our chalices in this meeting. This whole meeting is simply about spreading the light of understanding and truth and compassion so that we have an opportunity to participate in the larger spirit of our movement. We're being excluded from it right now, and we're told that we don't need our own chalices. We can rely on somebody else's. And I don't think that's the way we want to go. So we light this chalice to honor our individual spiritual freedom to search and question and doubt and respond and have dialogue and all those things that are so necessary for us to find the truth together. So there we go.
Okay. Thank you for jumping in there, Rick. And Jay, take it away.
All right, Joel, thank you very much. And thank everyone for attending this evening. I'm going to put a link to my campaign bio page, which has a video and other stuff, into the chat. It's there right now. It's at fifthprincipleproject.org/Jay Kiskel. I'm not going to cover all of this, but just as a way of background and bio, I am, as Joel mentioned and others, that I'm a candidate for this year, for an election this year at General Assembly for a position on the UUA Board of Trustees. And I think is germane to this conversation today, this is the first time from my recollection and research that there's been an election for a trustee in about a decade. So even though we have a fifth principle, the right of conscience and democracy and the democratic process in our congregations and society at large, we're not using it in our leadership team. Enough said with that. Personally, I am like everyone else on this Zoom session. Back in 2017, I was focused on my home congregation. I'd retired from a 35-year IT career, and I was settling into a happy post-work career of gathering, preserving, archiving Southern Unitarian Universalist history. That was going to carry me through for years and years and years. But then I went to General Assembly in 2017, got caught up in the rush of the hiring controversy with Reverend Andy Burnett, the resignation of Reverend Peter Morales, the consistent call of liberating Unitarian Universalism from white supremacy culture, that I turned my research skills into investigating that. Now, I've been a UU for 30 years. I've served on my church board, Mid-South District, other boards. I'm currently the president of the Universalist Convocation. But all that got pushed aside when I began to realize how democracy had simply atrophied in the governance of our association. I'll talk about General Assembly and about the board separately when we have other conversations. But this alarm was so great that along with Frank Casper, who can't make it tonight, he sends his apologies, that we started the Fifth Principle Project. Many of you are familiar with the website. We co-authored a book, Used to Be UU, The Systematic Attack on Our UU Liberal Values, What You Need to Know and What You Need to Do. And I put my name in to be a candidate for a board of trustees on the national level. So 30 plus years being a UU, and I'm at a heightened sense of concern about the direction of our denomination and how those decisions are being made. I live here in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm married to the wonderful Helen Borland, and we have 3 wonderful kids, all grown, all adults, doing just great. And so I'm thrilled to be here with you folks tonight. Kate, I'll hand it off to you directly.
Okay, Kate.
Okay, well, my name is Kate Rhodey. My first contact with Unitarianism was in Corvallis, Oregon, when I was about 7 or 8 years old. And we went to the Garfield School, and they were organizing a church there. And my parents were very active church members until long after I left home. And my mother actually had a meditation manual published by the UUA. They were very, very active UUs until there was a big church fight in Corvallis, and they were kind of pushed out. And that was sad because it was right at the end of their lives when they could have used a church. I started a seminary in 1976. At that time, there were maybe 2 women in full-time parishes without a husband. There were some couples. And my first parish was in Georgia in 1980. And I served congregations in Georgia, British Columbia, Devon, Pennsylvania, Westchester, Pennsylvania, Florida, let's see, Sacramento, Omaha, and Austin, Texas. The long-term ministry I had was 17 years here in Westchester, where I'm retired, and I'm minister emerita here. And this congregation and the other one in Pennsylvania, where I was for a year interim, are the only 2 that had not been affected by clergy sexual misconduct. So these were my best ministries, my happiest ministries. The other ones were problematic. And my very last one, I was one of the ministers early on who got us to make some rules about it. But in terms of actually doing what ought to be done about it, I still think they have a long way to go. When I started in 1980, though, we were worse than the Catholic Church in terms of percentages. The irony now is I am being, they're trying to get me to the same body that allowed a minister who was a sexual predator into the last church I served, and allowed her to continue until she decided to leave on her own, is now after me for some Facebook posts. So it does seem, I think, that the ministry has changed in terms of, I think, as we all have found, that we're being silenced, and people are going after me in a way I never would have thought possible, and which I find very hurtful. I'm lucky in that I'm retired. Nothing much can happen to me, but I've lost my religion, and I probably will lose my accreditation as a UU minister. I'll be in basically the same boat as Todd Eckloff, it looks like. I hope to, I have a civil rights attorney. I've been referred to actually another one who has a better reputation, who I may talk to too. So I'm concerned about the meanness that has taken over at a national level, this sort of take no prisoners attitude. Just a really short story of what I think of as Unitarian Universalism and what's changed. My very first ministry, I was invited by a prison chaplain to come and provide some liberal religion in the prison. And I had no idea what to do, so I just took my doing your own theology to prison. And I wasn't too sure whether that was going to be a great idea, to let prisoners do their own theology. And it was a wonderful experience. I think one of the more profound and amazing experiences in my ministry in terms of the depth, the intelligence, the kind of conversations we had. These are all kind of redneck not terribly educated, but not dumb guys from Georgia. And, you know, I guess it proved to me that my faith in, you know, the open-minded pursuit of truth as a group going back and forth can lead anybody forward in the least likely places. And my feeling is that the majority of my colleagues and certainly the leaders of the Unitarian Universalist Association have lost faith in our faith and are acting like we need somebody to tell us how to think and what to do and how not to make mistakes. And and I thought seriously about saying, well, I'm retired, like Jay, I'll do my thing, but it's happening all over. It's not just happening with us. So I might as well do what I can here for a while, but it hurts.
Okay, let's move on to Reverend Rick, since there are many people who may not know him, even though he's been our minister for longer than I've been around the congregation.
Well, yes. Hello, everyone. First of all, I just want to say thanks to Kate. I am sorry that you're hurting, but you are an inspiration to me. I'm so grateful for your voice, and you have been fearless. Or you might have had fear, but you bore through, and you spoke truth to power. And so very early on, you've been speaking out, and so I think my world would be greatly diminished had you not been there doing what you've done. So I have profound gratitude to you, and also to you, Jay, for the role that you're playing. So I'd really like to thank both of you for the role you're playing with such integrity. And so I'm Rick Davis. I've been the minister here in Salem since came in January of '93. So I guess I'm in my 28th year or something like that. And I never, ever even, this was not even on the possible horizon of things that would, how I would be spending these years in my ministry, that I would be in conflict with the UUMA and the UUA. I had been just a UUMA, I just loved it. I went to every chapter meeting. I loved connecting with colleagues. I was, I think, a really well-beloved colleague, and that's why I was elected to be a good officer for four times. And I just love the collegiality and our association too. If I went to a General Assembly, I just felt like you can stop and talk to anybody, and it's an enjoyable experience. And we're on this common journey towards a better place, and we're in dialogue together, and we don't all agree, and that's wonderful, because I don't want everybody to agree with me, because I don't know everything. Well, things took a very dramatic turn. Well, actually, I shouldn't say that. In a way, they did take a dramatic turn, but I had premonitions of things moving in a direction where I recognized, Kate, you said the meanness. When people start being mean, I know, I don't care how you're justifying it, how you're rationalizing it, you've fallen off track here. We need to get back on track, because if we can't do our work with compassion and love and understanding along the way, then it's not going to work. I also love the way you said the leadership has lost faith in our faith. That's the most succinct way of putting it. But anyway, and I was a good officer, which is sort of like a minister to ministers. And if a minister is having difficulties with their congregation or another colleague, they might call me, and we'd think it through together. And if they needed to resign their ministry, I would help negotiate a good, generous package if possible, given the finances of the congregation, that sort of thing. And so in one of my roles, and I won't go into this, more confidential, I had one good officer's role where I had to facilitate the resignation of a person from the UUMA. And the way that was done was so, I was taken aback. it was done with a spirit of vindictiveness, and there was no sense of compassion or understanding. And it was somebody I knew fairly well. And so that, that really disturbed me. It also disturbed me that I had let it happen and hadn't said anything. And so I didn't know Todd Eckloff terribly well, but I had connected with him at the chapter retreats. And I saw him mistreated there because he was a white cisgendered male. And it was easy to pick him out and accuse him of something that he wasn't guilty of. And then when he wrote his book, and all my colleagues were jumping on. It felt like a neighborhood pile-on. As I have a chapter in the book, Used to Be UU. It describes, I could really shorten this and say, read that chapter and you'll understand where I'm coming from. So maybe to shorten it up and keep us from taking up too much of your time, I saw that it wasn't right to condemn Todd in the way he was being condemned for honestly sharing his views in a book. And all of the accusations against the book have never been substantiated by a single quote. It's the most incredible thing. It's so unfair. It's so unjust. It's cruel. It's mean. I didn't want to have anything to do with it. So I stood up beside Todd, and I became a rogue good officer. The UUMA wanted me to not speak about this from the pulpit and to start trying to pull Todd back into the right way of thinking. And I said, no, I'm not going to do that. I don't feel like I can, with integrity, do that. I'm protecting the integrity of liberal ministry and the right of a minister to write a book and express their opinion. That's under threat, and I will protect that as best I can. And so here I am playing this role that I never expected to play, and yet I play it because I really do care about our tradition and what it offers people. Over the years, I've really fallen in love with the lay folks who join the congregations and recognize that what we can offer as a spiritual home is such a valuable thing. And for us to do a bait and switch and change the theology and the whole way we do it, to lose faith in our faith is, I'll fight for that. And so I am, and that's why I'm here. That's enough for me.
Okay, we're already over 20 minutes in, so I'm wondering if I want to keep things moving and so we can get the open discussion. So Jay and then Kate, do you have any additional things to say before we open up to the general discussion? Jay first and then Kate.
Yeah, just briefly, and I really would like this to be a good discussion. Bear in mind, a lot of stuff that Rick said, most UUs have no clue about. It's unfortunate. So what I focused on, and this comes from my IT career from 35 years, and at the end, I was a pretty hoity-toity guy. I was running international multi-million-dollar programs and learned how decisions got made, and who makes the decision is critical. This is my observation about the governance of the association. Decisions are being made by a small group of people who have no constituency. By changes made in 2011, our Board of Trustees are at large. They don't represent you, me, or any congregation, they represent themselves. And because in 2011, we got rid of the districts and district identified and elected trustees, now a nominating committee identifies a board member. And our bylaws say, absent a competing candidate, there is no election. So in effect, if I had not submitted my name by petition, there would be, again, no election for the 3 trustees who are up this time because of expiration. And because there's no election, there's no discussion. And the decisions get made about what white supremacy is, who gets decentered, who gets attacked. I too, I'm not in the same league with Kate and Todd, but I've come under a lot of attack from my book as well. I'm banned from promoting my book at General Assembly. That's a done deal. So I'm trying to get to who makes the decisions, and I think it's us, the owners of the denomination, should get a chance to engage in that decision by engaging in election and selecting candidates we want to be our representatives. I could go on to 1,000 different levels, but I think that is a clear thing we should have an understanding on. We should have a voice.
Okay, Kate, a little bit more. Anything else you want to add?
I couldn't agree more with Jay. I think I don't think what's happening is what the overwhelming majority of UUs would like to see happen. I think they're by and large ignorant, and like the rest of us, it just kind of crept up on us. I was retired. I had no idea really until the Todd thing exploded, what was going on. And yeah, I agree with that. I think the plan A is to try to, get back within the UUA. I think the plan B is to get another fellowship committee so that people who don't want to go along with the UUA have another way to get ministers, because right now the ministers are being controlled. People can't get in and they get thrown out by the UUA. And I hadn't noticed till recently that the UUMA has a lot more say on who the members of the MFC were. It used to be they only had 2 slots. They now have almost half the slots, I think. So, and I've heard from a lot of people who wanted to become ministers that they felt they couldn't pass the litmus test. And when Rick retires, where will you go?
Yeah. And Reverend Rick, do you have anything else you'd like to say briefly before we open up?
No, I don't think so. I think that Jay and Kate have covered it fairly well. So I think we can go into discussion.
Okay, here's the way I'd like to work it, since some of us are none of us are familiar with everybody. So anybody who wants to comment or raise a question, could you say your name and where you're from as a way of introducing yourself to everybody else? And I got one somebody who's already volunteered to do a question, and that's Eric Schumann. So Eric, it's your turn.
Thank you, Joel. I'm a fellow member of the Committee on Ministry here in Salem, which is sponsoring this event. And I want to observe that Jay Kiskel, who met with our committee a couple of weeks ago, is probably one of the most upbeat, optimistic, non-cynical people I've ever heard in my life. And I have a question for both Jay and for Kate. And that is, why are you so damn optimistic? Why do you think there's any future for democracy in the Unitarian Universalist Association? So Kate, why don't you start, and then Jay?
Maybe you should have Jay start. I think he's more optimistic than I am. Go ahead, Jay.
Thank you so much for the kind words. I'm trying to enjoy myself through this process, and it's not easy. But I truly believe that someone needs to stand up and then see who else stands up. I can't rely on someone else saying, you go do it and I'll follow you. So I'm a former Marine, so I fully understand that I am in the first Marine on the beach scenario here. I don't know how far I'll get. But what I do know, that if once people understand that we really should be driving our decision-making from our congregations through our delegates into the board, it is completely inversed at this time. The meeting, Rick, that I just attended, this open house, it was clear, confirming again every time we have conversations with members in the leadership team. They're trying to fix us. We are broken. And they're trying to fix us by declaring this thing called white supremacy culture, which I've come to learn now means everything that's wrong. Susan Frederick Gray said it. white supremacy culture, the dominance of white people. It also is transphobia, homophobia. I got to check my notes. Colonialism, capitalism. It's like every evil is going to be crammed into this one concept. But the decision to how to take the denomination forward is being made by such a small group of people without challenge. One board member said, for instance, that critical race theory, I don't want to get deep into the trenches of that, but this is the most illiberal ideology that has come around in a long time. It has high social content. But one board member said, it is the future of America. We're not stifling voices, we're just preventing voices from causing harm. Well, check with me about my voice that got stifled and anyone else. Kate, this is stifling. But these folks in the leadership position, unelected, without representation, are looking at this from a top down, we're going to fix this denomination. I think it's totally upside down. What I did learn, which is new news, why I get my hair on fire so often, because right now it's on inside baseball. One more comment. I thought in 2022, the first vote on our changes to our principles and sources will come up. That's been delayed now to 2023. And if that gets a majority vote in General Assembly, it goes to 2024 for a 2/3 vote. There are folks right now who are actively engaged, who are working to change our principles, sources, statement of belief, etc. I think when that hits the congregations, because people can identify with the principles, there's going to be a different dynamic in how we think about our leadership team. And by that time, I think it's too late. We need to get awareness up earlier. And maybe next time, Joel, there'll be 2 people running. With my support as a board member, I hope.
Okay.
And slowly, and we just need to have conversations. This shouldn't be done by a committee of few who are representing no one but themselves.
Can I ask Jay, do you have a video we could send out to?
Yes, if you go to Fifth Principle, in the chat, fifthprincipleproject.org, there's a 4-minute video that gives why there's an election and then where I come from, how I got involved in this whole thing.
And so we could just post that and send that out too.
Yeah, and it's on YouTube as well. So if you click on it and go to YouTube, you'll get the URL for that as well. You can share that on social media anywhere you want.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's
Okay. Kate, do you have any optimistic
you
things to
know,
say?
I'm a little reluctant to hitch my wagon in any way to your star because I don't want to drag you down. But there are people who would appreciate what I have to say that I could send you, because I've been reading all the horrible things about me that people are saying. People barely, lots of people who've never met me, never had a conversation with me, who are willing to write long letters to say why I shouldn't be a minister. And what a horrible person I am. And if you don't believe them, you should hear about the other person who told them that. So it's really, I'm glad we don't burn witches anymore. So I don't know if the only thing that makes me optimistic is I see a lot of pushback all over. During COVID, I've been digging into this whole thing of cancel culture, which is not just the UUA, it's the colleges, it's the ACLU, it's even, the New York Times, a lot of publications, etc. But all of a sudden there are springing up a lot of organizations to push back. And I've even, in The Guardian recently, I saw articles that up until now would not make mainstream news. These are articles pushing back on transitioning children and sterilizing children, which nobody's been willing to talk about publicly, and The Guardian now is. But it's So there is pushback in the culture. There are people writing books about it. There are organizations forming. But, you do see, in the Democratic Party, you see bits and pieces of this happening local level. So I don't know what to think. I do think Trump fueled it, but I also think this fuels the Trumpers. I think there's what do they call it? The opposite of a virtuous circle, where this kind of illiberalism feeds on one side, feeds it on the other. And I was hoping that with Trump leaving our government, some of the temperature might go down enough that some of the folks on the progressive side might return to a more progressive atmosphere, less illiberal one. That's all I can hope.
Okay,
I think people standing up is what needs to happen, and it is starting to happen.
I see a hand up from Sarah Pickett, and then Alex Holt would like to say something. So Sarah, you're next, if that's a hand that's raised because you want to say something.
It is. Thanks, Joel. And then I also noticed you might look in the chat, because Robert Moore asked a good question in the chat that might be nice to be discussed. So for Jay and Kate, my question is oh, sorry, I'm from Salem. And in speaking with other congregates, here we are. We're at the most west little corner of the United States that you can get. Boston is a world away. Some people have never even been to Boston, and so the concept of UUA, the concept that there's this entity that's out there that is dictating things to us is just so foreign. People don't think of this. And then maybe a group of people say, well, hey, this is something's going on. These things are happening. This thing happened with Todd. And they get dissonance. This isn't making sense, especially when then they look at UU World and they say, well, it seems nice. I mean, they're talking about racial justice. Well, that's good, right? That's nice. And it's hard to see how this could not be a good thing, how this could be damaging in actuality. And so I guess what I'm asking is partly is how can you reach these people and let them know what's going on without just sounding like, hey, I think this is wrong, and just start yelling and shouting and arguing for the sake of arguing and saying this is wrong, and can't you see this is wrong, and historically this is wrong, and so forth and so on. But try to get them more involved, because so many people are like, it's in Boston, I don't get it, it's not affecting me, I don't want to deal with it.
Well, I think the thing that's going to affect those of you in Salem is, no offense to Rick, but he's not going to live forever. Certainly he's not going to be the UU minister at Salem forever. And the Boston's going to decide who will be eligible to be recommended to be your to be looked at to be your next minister. And the process, people are being inculcated with certain views, and If they're not, they may not make it through the process. Now, you can choose someone else, but you don't have any real process for doing that. So that's something that's concrete, that's going to come up soon, that's going to affect your congregation.
Jay, any response to Sarah?
Yeah.
Okay, then Alan Holt, he'd like to say something and then ask a question about the future. So Alan, wherever you're at, and then
It's,
I may read some things from the chat, and then I see a hand up from Ruth. Okay.
it's Alex, by the way.
Oh, Alex,
That's
I'm
fine.
sorry. Yeah,
That's
okay.
fine. That's
Yeah.
fine. I'm called a lot of different names.
Yeah.
I'm the transitional minister part-time in Meadville, Pennsylvania, in the wilds of Northwest Pennsylvania. And the congregation here is quite a bit isolated. It's almost 200 years old congregation, and they're very proud of their history and so on. When I told them what was going on in the UUA and the UUMA about a year and a half ago before COVID hit, none of them knew anything about it. They were astonished. And so I contacted some other congregations that are lay-led in other parts of the country where I have been before. And I asked them, have you heard of this? No, we haven't heard of it at all. So some of you have already referred to the fact, I think Sarah did, that Boston's a long ways away. What do we know? How does it affect us? But here's the question I wanted to really ask. Our foundation is based upon congregational polity, the right of every congregation to be able to do its work, have its independence, and follow its own mission. And what I hear and what some of you said was the word denomination as opposed to association. So I'm wondering if what we're seeing, and this is the question I have, is moving towards a top-down denominational model as opposed to how both Unitarianism and more or less Universalism existed for a long time. So that's my question. Are we going through a fundamental change away from our foundation of congregational polity?
Let me answer. Actually, Alex, you're spot on. There is a difference between an association and a denomination, and they're clearly governed differently. Right now, we are the UUA, the Unitarian Universalist Association, made up of autonomous congregations that are freely associated. And that autonomy is given to us through congregational polity. I know this is all inside baseball in the weeds conversation, but it's important to know that our congregations make decisions for themselves. We don't ask people who to hire, how to spend our money, how to raise our money, et cetera. That's due to our independence. And we're in association, which becomes the complicated issue. How do you organize 1,000 congregations into some cohesive element? I will share from my experience in IT management at the global level, there is no cohesive element for these large moving beasts. It has to be done through influence, consensus, and a lot of talking and a lot of agreement on what our goals are. But I truly believe in my research, and it's seen in the Widening the Circle of Concern, which I consider a very flawed report, which is now being the basis for our, quote, 5-year plan. It's really flawed. There is a movement to create what I consider an ecclesiastical center in Boston, as well as an administrative center, where polity, which again, if you look into the recommendations in Widening the Circle of Concern, is under attack. One quote I love to say that comes from the report, Widening the Circle of Concern, the fact that the UUA can't tell congregations what to do is baloney. They just feel they can. I don't believe that's healthy for the association. And I don't think we need an ecclesiastic center. We're different, we're unique. And I think we should accept who we are. Now, if we want to change, I think that should include all of us, not a few from the top making decision down. I hope that answered your question.
I'm just going to read a comment because it didn't seem like if Marian Henning said, when they say it is the future of America, they mean it. The advocates of CRT, critical race theory, are pushing it into every aspect of society. I think that's just a comment. And then Ruth Larson, you had your hand up.
Yes, I'm from the Unitarian Congregation in Salem. And our Committee on Ministry, sponsoring tonight's meeting, also sponsored some educational discussions after people were offered the chance to read the Gadfly papers by Todd Eckloff. And after these sessions with the congregants, they asked us to write a letter to UUA, saying that they should rescind Todd's censure, that, they should stop saying that we're a white supremacist organization, et cetera. And please, let's discuss things. We have never heard, after writing this letter, we have never heard from the UUA. What kind of practical things can a congregation do, Kate and Jay, besides supporting Jay's candidacy as a congregation? We could do that. What else can congregants or congregations do to get their attention?
Let me give you the 8-word answer almost. We just need to get more involved in national denominational affairs. It's easily tuned out. People just need to know. And some of this is complicated. And again, I say that's because now 2023, 2024, we're going to be faced with some big decisions about principles, Article 2, which is very big. And that we need to be engaged in a way that our voices can be heard. My fear is, because in 2009, when the last vote to change our principles, the first vote, which is the majority vote, in 2009, the last time that vote was taken, it was decided by, I think, 13 votes not to move it forward. But the shocking element of this is less than 1% of UUs, less than 1% of UUs were engaged in that decision. Heaven forbid we should change our principles with maybe 4 or 5% of the denomination voting, and the other 97% or so saying, I didn't agree to that. This is not a good road to be on. We need to get everyone on board before we start making fundamental changes. So become aware. Get a denominational affairs department or committee back together again. I'm sorry, that was more than 8 words, but you know what I'm saying.
Okay, next.
I also think you can talk to other UUs. I mean,
Yes.
we all know somebody in another congregation. You do run into other UUs all over the place, and I think, and especially on the internet now, you have the opportunity to bring things to people's attention. Post Jay's video. Talk about it with other UUs in Oregon, or if you have friends back east or in the middle of the country. I think in some ways, like Tip O'Neill said, all politics is local. It's that personal element that can start a movement, I think.
Okay, I see Bob Muir posted a couple of things in the chat, and I see his hand up, so he's going to be next, and then Marion Henning. So, Bob?
Yeah, Tip O'Neill said that about politics
and
being.
Bob is also from our Salem congregation.
Yeah, thank you, Joel. Tip O'Neill made that comment because he was a representative. Politics are very local for representatives, not so much for senators. The question I have relates to part of the book, used to be a UUA. Part of the book discusses in worthy detail the history of the changes in governance and how they have led to where we are now as far as the governance structure we're under. The impression I had, and this is what I'm asking about, is that the changes that were made, I've got 2 points here, were made democratically by the General Assembly. And secondly, it appears that they were made irrespective of the issue of critical race theory or a particular objective. So there's 2 parts to that question. Do you agree with that characterization? And if so, can we not deal with the problem of governance as a neutral issue, not necessarily tied at all to what policy objectives that the association undertakes freely.
So Bob, I'm going to make sure I answer the last one. Can governance be handled as a neutral issue?
Right.
But I heard two questions. One, or two observations. One's in 2011, were the changes to the bylaws done democratically? And the second one, was it irrespective of critical race theory?
That's right. That's
Okay.
correct.
So first, to the first one, in 2011, it had already been widely established through the Fifth Principal Task Force report of 2009. And I recommend everyone read that. And this task force ran from 2007 to 2009, and it had some stellar UUs on this committee as well. They declared General Assembly as a vehicle to conduct the business of the association dramatically broken, in that not all congregations send delegates. I think 40% don't even show up. Delegates that do show up self-select. It was discriminatory because it was all in person. If you have the time, money, you can go. Most of the delegates showed up without any knowledge whatsoever of the issues to be decided. So yes, we held a convention. Yes, we took a vote, but it was taken in with the understanding that that apparatus that we were using was broken. Unfortunately, the 2009 Fifth Principal Task Force report's key recommendations never got implemented. General Assembly is still broken. We do not have accountable congregational delegates. That was discussed in this meeting tonight. I'm going to touch on in just a moment. So democratic, but a broken democracy. I hope that answers your question. Number two, irrespective of critical race theory. That's not exactly entirely true. You can go back to 2005 and I think 2007, other reports that you see being published by the UUA that are flirting with critical race theory, saying that our liberalism, our enlightened liberalism, is really not the way to go into the future. This has been discussed internally, deep in the weeds, but it shows up in the nominating committee, the committee that identifies individuals to serve on the board. That committee was given the explicit charter, and I think it had a good intention to bring more diversity to our board members. Gender, age, race, sex, orientation, color, you name it. That was their objective. So there was already an intent to start changing the shape of our leadership team. And there was already an intention deep down that there is something we need to do from the top down to correct these problems. It's a faint hint, but I'd say after the 10 years that the nominating committee has been in business, they may have achieved their diversity objectives, but we now have an homogeneously thinking leadership team. And that leadership team has adopted critical race theory as one of their organizing principles. It's in, okay. Our esteemed president of Meadville Lombard said quite clearly that the report, Widening the Circle of Concern, is based on critical race theory. And those who are cemented in liberalism, like I am, are going to object to it. So none of these things can be disconnected. Can denominational governance be disconnected from critical race theory? I think if we had a conversation, it would self-right. I do want to answer one of the other questions you had in the chat, if I can do that, Joel.
Okay.
About, Bob, what was it? If Kiskel is elected to the UUA board, what will he do about racism in our organization? I think you had another one there, Bob. Yeah. Historically, how well has UU democracy served the issue of eliminating racist culture? Are you talking about racist culture inside of UUism or outside of UUism?
Well, both, at least with the assumption that there might be racist culture within our organization. Let me point to the fact that's undeniable. We do not represent in our distribution of leadership, clergy, and congregant members the face of America. So we're selecting somehow certain types of people are coming and other types of people are not coming into our congregations. Doesn't that raise the question that some sort of latent racism may be at work?
I would love to have that conversation. I will also go back to my buddy who is who resigned over this issue about white supremacy culture. He's from a mixed race family, took his kid out of RE because he didn't want him exposed to that type of thinking. He asked, where are all the policemen? Where's all the ex-military? We have narrowed our denomination message again and again and again and again till we're shrinking. I don't think we have a compelling message to go out to the larger world, Bob, either if it's on a racial basis, age, economic. I think we have a muddled message right now. I don't have an answer for that. But I do know in this meeting, I just came back from the UUA Board of Trustees open house. It was a clarity that I could not imagine having received. And this is our president speaking, Reverend Susan Frederick Gray, who I actually admire. I voted for her. Where I understand their use of white supremacy culture, as I said earlier, is every ill on the planet Earth: transphobia, homophobia, colonialism, capitalism. And the only example she could state, the only example she could provide of what, quote, racism was hiring practices that they corrected back in 2017. They adjusted hiring practice. I think our hiring, never mind, I won't go into it, but we did a better job at finding candidates, including more candidates. And she said in leadership now, going from 12 to 40% people of color in hiring. If that's our racist problem, we've done a good job of addressing that. I still have not found the content to say we Unitarian Universalists are white supremacists, that we take in our hearts the advancement of white people over others. I think just the opposite of UUs. Forgive me for being bold. I just think of the opposite. Bob, I'd love to have you respond, and if Joel can allow a conversation here.
Well, I'm watching the clock a little bit, and Marion Hennings has
Right.
been wanting to speak up for a little while, so I'm going to let her speak, and then we'll see who's still in the game. Okay, Marion?
Notice how he said the only example. She said, I'll give one example.
You're muted, Marion. Marion?
Yes.
Ah, okay, good.
Okay. I wanted to say that in a sense, we have to feed the beast in order to participate because of having to pay large amounts of money to go to GA. And if that's the only place that ordinary congregants have a chance to participate and vote, we're never going to get a true democracy there.
So again, I think the association leadership is doing a good job recognizing that virtual works. And if previously, if you attended a GA virtually, you were a nobody, you were a second-class citizen. I think they're trying to change that. But from my point of view, if delegates are coming without being charged, without being a representative, what we're asking people to vote on is in the wrong class of people. Call me crazier than hell. I think we should start opening voting on things like our president, the moderator, changes to Article 2, to every single Unitarian Universalist in the country. I mean, was it the 17th Amendment that took the authority of legislatures, I think it was, to take the authority of legislators to appoint our state, or rather our federal senators? Now we get to choose that. I'd like to take that concept and just take this distribution of democracy into the hands of individual UUs for certain votes. It will require a burden on everyone to get engaged, but I think that's the way to engage folks. So there's no easy and the direct path, but I think the path is open the choice and the voices and voting to more and more people. And some changes are being made in General Assembly to make it more accessible.
I'd just like to jump in with an observation. When both the Gadfly papers, that book came out, and when Jay and Frank's book came out, if you read the reviews of these books, you'll see, I think this is very indicative of our movement. The ratio of people who love the book to people who have obviously a vested interest in panning it is very telling. It's overwhelmingly, the reviews very positive and glowing, and grateful for the insight that's being provided through these books. And I think that tells a story of, you said it too earlier, Kate, that the overwhelming majority of Unitarian Universalists, when they understand what's happening, would want to reclaim our democratic faith. And so I think that's good reason for hope, is figuring out ways to get to communicate with as many Unitarian Universalists as possible. Have them read the books, particularly Used to Be UU. I think that's a very helpful book. And so just taking those reviews as an indication of the response of Unitarian Universalists, I'd say it's a very positive sign, and mostly getting the word out, making people aware, making them be interested is vital. And it's hope. There's cause for hope, I would say.
I think the other thing is this whole thing about this whole notion that the UUA has that doing things top down, even if it were right, is effective. And in my 40 years as a minister, the only UUA program I think that's really been helpful to local congregations on kind of social change and attitudinal change was the welcoming congregation. That seemed to work pretty well in our congregation to get the conversation going and to move the congregation. Most of the other programming I've seen from the UUA has been ineffective. I've been the only white person in a lot of interracial situations, both as Latino and Black situations, and the whole CRT, the whole kind of ultra academic mindset that seems to be being promulgated. That's not appealing to anybody, no matter what your race is. The African Americans or the Latinos who have shown up and stayed at my congregation, it's because we as a congregation are doing and saying things that have meaning. It's not an ideology, but it's an inclusion. And the things I read, the things I preach about, the things the congregation is doing in the community, that's what brings people in or not. And most folks don't want to be singled out. They don't want to be segregated. If they wanted to go to church segregated, they go to a church. They don't want to be off in their little coven. They want to be part of the congregation working together.
Maybe we're winding down. There are some comments in the chat. Alana Graham says that it's too expensive to go to GA. And I think that's one of the things that was addressed in that 2009 report.
Yes.
About having GA be really the only, instead of a sort of a conference or convention as it is now, to have it really be a business meeting and have it only every 2 years, and have members who are selected by their congregations and supported by the congregation or the UUA so they can attend.
Yeah, also that the UUA
would be easier to attend it virtually, but it still does cost some money to be a participant.
But the recommendation was also to subsidize
right.
the delegates attendee, to make it truly an open door to anyone who can and wants to attend.
And then Alana also said in October 2016, the UUA Board of Trustees made a bold $5.3 million commitment to fund Black leaders in Unitarian Universalism to support ministry to Black identified Unitarian Universalists. That sounds like a hefty investment in ending racism in the UUA. She has to leave, but it's nice to know that she's not alone. And then Amanda Aikman responding to Rick, lay people will have to spread the word. Ministers are too afraid for good reason. And then I see a hand up from Nancy Haldeman and Corvallis.
Yeah, I had something in the chat. Somehow you missed it. But I just wanted to know the numbers. Let's see what my question said. Do you actually know who is running the UUA and UUMA? And are we talking about 10 people or 100? You know, I mean, I'm just curious if you have any idea of that.
Well, the UUA Board of Trustees, I think is 15 or 16 members. I got to do the actual count on this. Susan Frederick Gray, our president, is a member of the board, but she has no vote. So it's 15 or 16 people that really serve on the board, and the board runs the denomination in between general assemblies. But I don't know, but they set the agenda for that. I don't know anything about the UUMA leadership team.
My sense is there are people behind the board.
There are any number of advocacy groups, of which I consider the fifth principal one, but we don't have a voice, that do have a stronger voice on the board. But the people who actually make the decisions is really just a handful.
But you're saying it really is the Board of Trustees that's making the decisions.
They have enormous implicit and explicit powers, enormous.
And it's about the same number of the UUMA.
That the Board of Trustees on the UUMA.
There's a Board of Trustees and a few, they've completely overhauled it. Just 100% overhauled the thing. They have a new system that nobody understands. So now they're kind of making it up as they go along. That's what I caught up in.
I've just heard that there's some very intelligent people there at the top. And I keep thinking that there's, you know, people behind the scenes who are pulling strings and stuff. And maybe it's the UUMA. Maybe that's where it's coming from.
No.
Well, there's one thing that we need, and I don't want to get into this critical race theory because this is kind of a cultural war trap that we can never get out of. But critical race theory has really taken root in our seminaries and elite universities. And it really has an intoxicating element to it. And it's interesting and it's great conversation. I object to it is because it displaces UU values.
Yes.
I mean, critical race theory is not compatible with UU values. And so trying to get UU values and critical race theory to coexist is not possible. Now, people who want to pursue critical race theory, social engineering, I'm happy for them to go where they need to go, but it is antithetical to our liberal values. I'm not making this up. This is just the way it is.
No, it's
so. But there's a heavy influence of this ideological thinking going on right now within our leadership team, coming out of our seminaries.
No, I have been astounded at how many UU ministers do not know what free speech is. You know, when they're talking online, they say, oh, well, so-and-so has free speech. They could say it. And then they were accountable, meaning they were punished. Well, if you're punished for your speech, that's not free speech. But they don't seem to understand that. They simply do not understand the concept of free speech. They don't understand the free exchange of ideas and why that's a good thing. You know, there's a whole new ideology that is overtaking the UUA, a lot of parts of the academy, a lot of younger people in publishing. There's this whole anti-liberal, anti-democratic philosophy.
Yeah, so, you know, freedom and tolerance, those aren't the end games. Those are the conditions for us to thrive as a religious denomination. I don't think those conditions exist now. I think that this lack of tolerance for different opinions is pretty strongly seen in both myself and, of course, with Todd and yourself, Kate, and others. And we can't turn our backs to that and say, well, those are just troublemakers. This is part of a denomination move to gather us into a way that will correct our behavior, which I don't think is a UU way to approach the problem. I think we should use our values to, Bob, to go back to your issues, I think we should double down on our values as the most potent weapon against racism, fighting it, changing people's minds and hearts. I think those are our best weapons.
I mean, that's certainly what King preached. He preached liberal religious values.
Bob Muir, do you have your hand still up? Do you have some additional? And then I think we're at 10 minutes after 7. I think we begin wrapping this up. So Bob?
Yeah, I'm very grateful for this discussion, and it's only a small part of a long and complicated discussion, and let's keep going with the discussion. I was at the open house this afternoon as well, and I heard Susan Frederick Gray answer the question about give me an example. And it was my question she was answering, by the way.
Okay.
Give me an example of, I think it was systemic racism, how it's manifested within UUA. And then she did give the example. But Jay, she very clearly said, this is only one example. And then she gave 2 elements that you did not mention about systemic racism at levels that I would not ordinarily think about. And one was, hey, when we're advertising for positions, it's not enough to simply say we're not discriminating. We need to actually make sure that the pool of applicants is a diverse pool, because otherwise people are self-selecting not to apply, and you want them there to be looked at. And then the second one, the second one had to do with, and I'm sorry the bird has flown out of my mind for the moment, but there was another element in the, it had to do with academic degrees. And she explained how what we're really looking at is skill sets, not academic degrees. But if you look at populations of women and people of color, if they don't have all of the degrees that you're asking for, they will not ask. But the studies, they will not apply. But the studies show that men will apply, notwithstanding not having all the degrees. And she could use the figure 60%. So how does that operate as a structure of systemic racism, or let's say more generally, discrimination?
Well, I don't know if,
Let me finish the thought. It's the question.
Yeah, sure.
It's a question, and it operates this way in my mind. When you're not aware of how groups within your society react to what you think are neutral principles, but those principles in fact inhibit them from doing things which other people, in this case, white males, then you're in effect tacitly supporting a system that's having a disparate impact. So she says, we have to raise our level of consciousness by talking to people and finding out, well, what does affect your decision? How do you interpret this? And try to make the playing field more neutral. That's the question. Is that not a worthwhile way of thinking about it?
I completely agree. By the way, I was reading reports prior to Susan's administration where the same conversation of raising the pool of qualified candidates was ongoing. This is not a new discussion within the hiring practices. I think, Peter Morales, it was under his presidency. He had initiated a report, I think in 2009, to go and address this notion. But putting it under the banner of white supremacy culture, conscious or unconscious, I think does a disjustice to everyone who's involved in this process. I think finding qualified candidates, believe me, I hired scores and scores and scores of people in my career, and I hired them from all over the world. So I'm quite aware of how you hire people, different cultural differences involved. But we are putting every problem under a single problem of white supremacy culture without looking at this. Is it just our hiring practices that are at fault? Can we do a better job? Can we skill up individuals? So I object to every problem being white supremacy culture. I object to saying that our values have not been effective in combating racism.
It sounds like name calling to me too. And
I'm sorry?
It sounds like name calling. When people put that label on it, we're not really getting to the underlying problem. We're just making people feel bad.
Yeah.
Which name is that, Bob?
Critical race theory or
Yeah.
systemic racism. We
Right.
need to address the problem and not stick labels on people and groups.
I just think those theories, critical race theory, is not appropriate for a UU institution that lives on liberal values.
Yeah, it's dogmatic.
Well, I think it's more than that, but we can continue the conversation and I'm happy to have that with you, Bob.
So just before we leave, I think it would be good to have a word about upcoming General Assembly and how we can be involved. I know that we're interested in registering delegates and what the votes are that are coming, and how do you determine, how do you know what's coming up and how to direct members to vote? Has that been, I'm sure it's been discussed, but we have less than a month ago, a little bit more than a month ago before GA. And
well, again, this was discussed at the open house as well to Greg Boyd. I believe delegates should be charged by their congregations to vote the will of the congregation. And in the case of myself and my opponent, nothing's going to change. It's either me or Sam. And I think congregations can look at our profile pages and make that decision and charge their delegates accordingly. There will be a candidate forum on the 24th, I think at 4 or 4:30 Central Time, but that's competing with 12 other events. However, again, based on a number of suggestions and prodding, I believe there's going to be a pre-GA candidate forum on June 1st at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Put it in pencil in your calendar, where there'll be a forum so you can actually meet the candidates prior to General Assembly and prior maybe to delegate selection or for delegates to actually query the candidates. And Bob, I hope you're there. I think you raised great questions. But I don't know about other things about on the agenda. I see one bylaw that may change the way the Presidential Search Committee selects candidates, reducing the number of candidates the Presidential Search Committee must identify from more than 2 to 1 or more. And if it's currently 2 or more, guarantees an election, the only guaranteed election in the entire association. If that bylaw passes, we may have no election for our president. So we have to see what's going to be put on the actual business agenda for voting at the plenary sessions. I don't know yet.
Nancy, your hand is still up.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, as far as the racism question, that we studied the book in our church, Centering, and it is full of examples of racism within the UUA and UUMA. And I was pretty shocked, you know, a lot of tokenism. So anyways, that's one book to look at. And it just, to me, it's ironic that they're telling the congregations that we're all racist, but aren't acknowledging that they have done so many racist things to ministers. That is all documented in that book.
All right, I'm thinking I'm going to push this to wrapping up. Let's have Reverend Rick extinguish our chalice. And thank you all so much for being here and staying through this lengthy discussion. Special thanks to Jay and Kate, who are participating from a different time zone, so it's later there than it is here on the West Coast.
I'll just end this meeting with thanking you all for the light you bring to bear in so many places in the world. Thank you for the lives that you lead and the light that you share. Good night, everyone.
Good night. Thanks again for being here.
Oh, thanks for having us.
Thank you.